And now, here's Mike Muse with the political news.
So let's get right to it and meet the candidates.
That completes the opening statement.
We're going to get right to it.
On Sway in the Morning.
All right, Mike Muse.
Hey, good morning, man.
Yeah, man, it's just kind of crazy what's going on in this country right now because I'm looking at a lot of footage of kids being in cages and separated from their families. It look like concentration camps these kids are in, and I've seen a lot of politicians saying, oh, these kids are having better facilities than they ever had before. Look, they're playing video games and they're caged.
Right.
And they're sleeping on floors with the little thermal blankets separated from their parents, not knowing what the future holds, being transported to different regions of the country, and you know they're going to get lost in bureaucracy. What is happening?
There's a lot happening, Sway. We've been talking about this ever since Monday in regards to the challenges of these families being separated from their children, these children being separated literally from their mothers and their fathers once they come over into the border. We addressed it on Monday, as you know, from a moral construct and a religious construct, because that was what it was happening throughout the course of the weekend when Attorney General Jeff Sessions was using the Bible scriptures in order to justify the means that in which they feel like they can separate and detain and enforce these laws. Since then, Sway, the story keeps evolving as these images and imagery keeps coming out, in particular what you just mentioned in terms of these children are being placed in cages. That's really what they are. They're these warehouses, these large facilities with an enclosed cage around them. So if you can imagine being a child in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you're around hundreds of strangers in a facility that are foreign to you, you don't speak the language, and again, Sway, you're without your parent. Do you know how the nerve-wracking you feel? Imagine if you were a child and you were lost in the mall when you were growing up. That immediate terror that hits you. That immediate terror when you're in the grocery store shopping for groceries with your parents and you lose your mother for a moment. Imagine what you felt like in that instance. That's really what's happening to these children on a daily basis. And so now what's being reported to even go further, unfortunately, is the news that broke late last night by the Associated Press. Now we have what's called tender age shelters. And what tender age shelters are for toddlers and young children, Sway, but also to infants. So imagine infants now being taken away from their mothers and being placed in a foreign facility, and foreign meaning just unknown bright lights,
So
stale
infants,
walls.
we're talking 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds?
We're talking months.
They're taking infants?
Yes, so the AP is reporting that the Trump administration officials have begun sending babies and other young children forcibly separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border to at least 3 tender age shelters in South Texas, Associated Press is reporting. They're getting this information from lawyers and medical providers who have visited the Rio Grande Valley shelters. They describe playrooms of prying preschool-age children in crisis. The government also plans to open up a 4th shelter to house hundreds of young migrant children in Houston. So that's where we are right now. And it's important to note with that, to go further, Sway, is that these workers who are in these facilities are not allowed to touch these children. So when these children are crying, when these children are wailing, the workers are not allowed to console them. They're not allowed to touch them. They're not allowed to confront them. So I want you to imagine as you're listening, that you're in your cars, you're in your office, right? You may have whatever views that you have. Just separate that. We've all had little brothers. We've all had little sisters. We've all had godchildren. We all have grandchildren. We have our own children. Imagine your 3-month, 6-month-old child crying and no one can soothe them. No one can comfort them. You're just watching this child cry. That is what's happening currently right now at our border. But to go further as we go into that, to really give the basis of that, here is how President Trump is explaining what this is, what he believes it is, and then I'm going to give context to where we are. Here's him speaking at a conference in talking to independent business owners.
Those are the only 2 options: totally open borders or criminal prosecution for lawbreaking. We want to solve this problem. We want to solve family separation. I don't want children taken away from parents. And when you prosecute the parents for coming in illegally, which should happen, you have to take the children away.
So before we open up the phone lines, and before we give other commentary, we have to go further with this. And so let's take a look at what this issue is. President Trump's administration in April, at the guise of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, had decided to change the policy and now to make what's called zero tolerance policy. What that means, citizens, now is that people used to be able to come over here seeking asylum or coming and crossing the border, whether legally or illegally. If they had children, they were sent to immigrant court. Right? What happened with immigrant court was the parents would go through a hearing, if you will. While the parents were going through the hearing, the children were placed in care of HHS, which is Human and Health Services. They couldn't be placed no longer than 2 to 3 days. At that point, the parents were released from the court system, if you will, and reunited with their children at that time to wait trial to determine what was going to be the outcome of their fate, whether or not they'll be able to stay in the country, if they'll be able to receive asylum, or if they'll be able to get sent back. They were able to track those individuals because they wore ankle bracelets. So we were able to track those individuals that were in the country. What President Trump then decided in April was to get rid of that system, change the policy. This isn't a law. This is a policy by Attorney General Jeff Sessions and President Trump. Now, to say zero tolerance, we're going to charge you in criminal court now. So we're going to not even send you to immigration court, which is what George Bush was doing, which is what President Obama was doing. We're going to send you to criminal court. Immediately, Sway, as you know, when you go to criminal court, that's when the children get removed. And so that is a crisis that we have right now. It's a self-made crisis, Sway. Yeah. There is no need for us to have tender age shelters. There is no need for us to have these children based in cages that we're seeing images now. There's no need to have these tent camps. It's 105 degrees right now in Texas. New York, we experienced a heat wave recently, 95 degrees, and we were complaining. Imagine being 105 degree temperatures in a tent outside with no parent around you. To go further too, Sway, just to talk about the facts a little bit more before we open up the phone lines, before we take comments, I want to make sure we have a linear conversation so that people can discuss the facts that nature. The judges, President Trump in this conference, I implore you all to watch this rally that he gave yesterday. It was a whiplash way, me watching it and trying to really decipher facts from what he was saying. He kept talking about there's thousands and thousands of judges that we have currently in our immigration court system, and that the American democracy and legislators wants 1,000 more judges in order to handle the immigration cases. Sway, in actuality, we only have currently 335 judges nationwide that handle immigration. Right now, we're budgeted to only acquire 100 more. So where is he getting this thousands and thousands from? Then he goes further to say that we're the only country that has immigration judges in courts. That's incorrect. The other countries too are Canada, United Kingdom, and Sweden. The whole issue is that if we have more judges, then we can process these immigration cases at a much quicker rate than we have. We want to talk about the whole disappearing act. In his statement yesterday, he said we end up losing these individuals by the hundreds and thousands. They disappear. We never see them. This is why we need to have this law. This is why we need to change this policy. That's not true. According to the annual Justice Department Yearbook of Immigration Statistics for the fiscal year of 2016, only 25% of those who were actually brought into immigration court went absent. They couldn't find them. So 75% of those, Sway, end up returning to the court system. Let's give numbers to be more granular with it. That amounted to 137,000 cases were processed in 2016. Only 25% of those did not show. And the 25% that did not show, they're counting that to the reason to be is because of lawyer situation. They didn't get the right mailing. They didn't have the right information. And another thing, the last thing to note, just in terms of the policy perspective of this, also too, he said Mexico isn't doing anything for us. They're not helping us with the situation. We talked about Monday how these immigrants are coming from Central America. So in order to get to the United States, they have to cross through the borders of Mexico. Mexico has been a great ally of ours in terms of preventing these individuals from coming. Starting back in 2015, Mexico intercepted 173,000 individuals coming from Central America from their borders. In 2016, they intercepted 151,000. In 2017, they intercepted 100,000. So one may be asking, why was there such a decrease in the last years in the Trump administration? Again, words matter, rhetoric matter. We've always talked about this on the show. As a result of his harsh rhetoric to Mexico, why does Mexico now feel the need to want to help us as they've been doing under when we had good relationships and really trying to solve this issue at the border? We can talk a little bit later on too about the moral aspect of it and where the policy is in terms of where the Congress is going to do about the situation in a moment.
Okay, so I'm gonna open up the phone lines and thank you for giving the context, because I think the whole country, I just want to hear the facts like that you're saying, because when I listen to the rhetoric on the news channels, all of them everybody's contradicting each other, and the information just seemed misconstrued. So these are the facts.
Yes.
There's no bias in what you're saying.
I haven't even inserted my opinion on this yet. And I won't
No,
because these are facts.
I don't. Yeah, just
these
kill them with facts.
Yeah,
and if right now we're gonna hit them with facts.
Yeah.
Tiffany, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, guys. I'm well. How are you?
Doing okay. What are your thoughts on this?
I just have a question. Who's paying for all of this?
The taxpayers
Who's paying
are.
for it?
Who?
Okay, lovely. And then my next question is, when they're making these tender camps, who's taking care of these babies? What if a baby has an issue or a baby's sick? Like, if they can't touch them, I'm just confused and terrified for these babies. I don't understand how can they not touch them? I don't understand.
That is a question that a lot of individuals are having issues with in terms of reconcile from a moral aspect of it, how they're not allowed to touch them. A lot of these shelters and camps are being regulated, I should say, by our governmental federal agency, HHS, which is Health and Human Services. So they contract out with federal contractors who have contracts with HHS in order to provide these type of care with aid workers. Keep in mind, though, a lot of these aid workers who work in these shelters are making minimum wage hours in dollars, approximately $10 an hour. There was one guy who talked about he actually quit the shelter because he couldn't handle being in there and not being able to touch the kids, and he was only making $15 an hour. And so he was talking about the emotional stress that it was taking on him.
All right, Tiffany, thanks for your call. You're a citizen.
Sway in the morning.
Josh is in Dallas. What up, Josh? How you doing?
What up, Josh?
Doing good, Sway. How are you?
Doing okay, man. What are your thoughts?
Really for me, I don't agree with it either. I think that it's very cruel and inhumane. But what about us as U.S. citizens right now? When we commit a crime, sometimes our kids are going to these same circumstances, right? We don't have family around. They go to the state. So what about those kids as well? There's no outrage there.
No, but the difference of that is a couple of things. There is more ways to verify in terms of let's say you're a single parent,
okay,
right? And let's say a mother's a single parent. Let's use this, and this is hypothetical. Say a mother's a single parent, she goes to jail, right? Then Department of Children's Services comes and pick up the child. At that moment, they contact the next of kin in order to come pick up that child, right? Either it's a grandmother, it's a father, it's some type of kin. They're able to document that. With these situations, when these kids are coming over, they're only coming over with their mother and their father, or just their mother or just their father. There is no other way to document who is next of kin. If they do have next of kin who live in this country, the next of kin may be illegal themselves or living in the shadows, and are too afraid in order to come to the court to pick them up and fear that they will be deported because of the way this administration has handled the rhetoric of that. The reason why they won't release these children just to anyone who says that they're cousin or kin to them is because of the human traffic scenarios. So President Trump has been talking about these loopholes that the Democratic Party has created. They're not loopholes. They are called provisions. And in these provisions that President George Bush was a Republican and President Obama has implemented, these provisions were in place in order to prevent the human trafficking, and human trafficking, and two, to make sure these children were well taken care of. And so that is the root, and this is why this is such a humane crisis, because now there's human trafficking involved. And I can talk about human trafficking at a much later time, but that's a huge epidemic that's happening in our country too as well, domestically and for migrant children.
Hey, Josh, thanks for your call, Josh. I'm gonna go to Justin, who's in Virginia. What up, Justin? How you doing?
Justin.
Hey, Justin.
Good.
Good morning.
I think that, if you come here illegally, you're breaking the law. And I think that the things that happen are just something that you're going to have to deal with if you want to come here illegally.
Okay. All right.
So that's another perspective. A lot of individuals don't see an issue with this, right? And to be clear, on both sides, the Democrats and Republicans both want immigration reform. They both feel the need that our immigration system needs to be better and needs to be improved about this. But unfortunately, what is happening is, and Justin is frustrated a lot with a lot of other individuals who are frustrated with immigration, but the question that we have to ask ourselves as human beings, just as human beings, do you want to use children as a leveraging tool in order to get this done? What we've seen from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Nielsen, she said that these kids are not being used as a deterrent in order to get immigration. But unfortunately, that counters what the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, has said. That counters what Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said, is that these children are being used as a deterrent. What I mean by deterrence way is a deterrent from, they're trying to send a signal to other individuals in Central America that you won't be able to enter here. And if you do enter here, here is the consequences of this. Okay. So you're using children as a pawn, separating infants in this moment. That is why this issue, as a human perspective, is an issue. Policy perspective, immigration does need reform. But the question we have to ask ourselves, is this the right way to go about it?
Hey, Justin, thanks for your call, man. We got DJ from New York. Good morning, DJ.
Yo, what up, Sway?
What's up, man?
Heather B?
Hey.
What are your thoughts, bro?
Hey, first off, let's talk about the real immigrants that came here in 1491. As an indigenous person of this continent, no human is illegal, okay? Second, I mean, children, they're humans in cages. I don't fuck with Trump. Sorry, Wonder. You cool and all, but I can't fuck with Trump, man.
Okay. That's, until you put yourself in that, I can't. You started off saying, imagine if you're a grandmother or you're a mother or you're a father. I'm imagining my daughter being put in that situation. It's hard to fathom, and I can't believe that anybody can look at this footage and be okay with it. And I got to question the heart and the spirit of that person that could look at that footage and go, well, hey, man, serves them right.
I'm going to go further and give you another image to make this as real as possible for us here in the studio and the listeners who are listening to us right now. There's a story that came out that a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome has also been separated from her mother. Her mother is currently in I think McAllen, Texas, and she has been shipped to Brownsville, Texas. So imagine someone with Down syndrome who has special needs, right, who needs special taken care of and special guidance, if you will, being separated from her primary caretaker who understands who she is, understands her isms, and now is in a foreign space with strangers with Down syndrome. And unfortunately, Sway, it goes to the morale aspect of it. I want to play audio for Corey Lewandowski, who was President Trump's manager, and here he was mocking that 10-year-old girl.
I read today about a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who was taken from her mother and put in a cage. I read about did you say want to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome
what
being
I
taken
said
from
is
her
you
mother?
Can pick anything you want up, but the bottom line is very clear.
How dare you?
So that is Corey Lewandowski mocking a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who has been separated from her mother in a completely different state, in a completely different city in a foreign land that is happening right now.
These people in elected office they're monsters, bro. They're not human. How could you mock a child? Your politics supersede all of that, your humanity?
Yeah. So now the Foreign Secretary of Mexico, they are now on a mission to get this 10-year-old girl united with her uncle, who is a United States citizen, who does live here in the United States, to see if he can come and get her out of that situation that she's in.
All right. This is you hanging out today, right, Mike?
Yeah, I am.
I might want to revisit this later on in the show.
No, for sure, yeah.
Okay, let's revisit this later on in the show.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover,
because I think it's important to talk about. And then people, if you want to, you have any comments on it, and whatever side of the fence you're on with this, hit up Mike Muse directly on the social media.
Yeah, folks, hit me up on Twitter and on Instagram at I am Mike Muse. That's I am Mike Muse, M-U-S and Sam E, and I'll be engaging with you all day today.
All right, we got a recap coming up next. Sway in the morning.